So I got to ask you, is this your first video chat?
Absolutely.
Yes? It's on record. It's on record. I want that on the Wikipedia page. So where are you tonight? This is your
I'm
office,
sitting
or?
in my little home office here in my apartment in New York City, downtown on 17th Street on the west side of the city. If you have any idea of the way Manhattan is structured.
I have never been to New York.
Well, it's a place to visit at one point or another, and a great place to live if you have the stomach for it.
What is required of a stomach to be a resident of New York?
Tolerance of compression, noise, ambition, aggression, and a willingness to participate in this soup of activities, all kinds of extraordinary people, some of whom you would love to meet, others you would love to avoid. It's a very complex and exciting in the sense that you absolutely don't know what's going to occur in the next 15 minutes or 24 hours. It's a city full of surprises. It's a hard city to understand from the outside, I have to say. But if you're born here, you sort of get used to it.
Sort of absorbs you then.
Well, you don't know that there's another way to live.
So hello and welcome to DesignChat, the best live design discussion on the internet. I'm your host, Ryan McGovern, on Twitter. I'm at Hoopajube and at DesignChat. Tonight is a very special night. If you've been here since the beginning or you're just showing up for the first DesignChat you've ever participated in, I think tonight is going to be sort of a milestone in that, you know, this is a big goal of what we want to do here with DesignChat. Tonight our guest, Milton Glaser, has been called a legend of design. There's no way that I could do an appropriate sort of intro for you. All I can do is be humble and thank you for coming to join us tonight. So golf clap everybody. Welcome to DesignChat, Milton Glaser.
Well, thanks for being humble.
My pleasure. You know, it's something that's interesting to me in doing this sort of thing like we were just talking about is being a student of design and having sort of a formal background in it, you get an appreciation for, and you have to take your design history courses.
Excuse me 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Shirley is.
Oh.
And I'm going to go.
Everybody hang tight for a second.
Excuse me 1 second. I'm sorry to interrupt
Yeah, go ahead.
the flow of events. Goodbye. Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So,
to repeat.
no worries, no worries. So you get sort of an appreciation of design history, and you have to study what's been done so you can be ready to do things in the future. And I think, you know, with online activities, there's a lot of youth. There's a lot of people who aren't even planning on going to a design school or anything like that, but are interested in the arts. And to marry that with things they should know about, hence you coming on the show, I think is a great connection, and I'm very excited about this. And I just want to just cry because I'm so happy right now. Thank you for coming on tonight.
Please don't cry. Please don't cry.
I promise I won't sob on you. So here's the deal, guys. So anybody who hasn't seen the show, what we're going to do tonight, we're gonna do a condensed show. We're going to do 30 minutes of chat, and then at the end of those 30 minutes, while you guys are in the chat room, definitely keep on throwing your questions up there. There's no way we're going to be able to get to all of them. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to pick the 3 best questions from tonight, and you have potential to ask a question of Milton Glaser. So at 8:30, we're going to switch gears and we're going to pick up the questions from the audience. So definitely do not hesitate. Put your questions in the chat room. So just to kick it off, you know, like I was saying earlier, in doing research for this, going back and looking at the multiple times that you've been interviewed throughout your career, it doesn't seem like there's a question I can ask you that hasn't already been asked. And I'm sure there's a handful that you're just sick of hearing and answering the same thing over and over and over again. So maybe let's kind of switch gears and start talking about current events or future design kind of things. Something happened today that I think would interest you. The New York Times announced that they are going to be charging in 2011. They're going to start charging for their online content of NewYorkTimes.com. And how they're going to do that is not for all content. They called it frequent readers. So you can read a number of articles in a month, but then if you want to read more, you're going to have to pay to get that sort of content. And I wanted to bounce that off of you and kind of see what you thought about it.
It's a very complex question. Certainly what the Times is concerned about is its own survival. Times has reached the point where, because of diminishing circulation, diminishing advertising, the question of whether it survives has become a real one. And to me, the United States without the New York Times has lost one of the most significant sources of real information and one of the ways that we protect our democracy. Can you imagine the activities of the Bush administration if the Times did not exist? The Times is absolutely essential to the foundations of democracy. So from my point of view, anything they have to do in order to ensure their survival makes me happy. But the question of what you pay for, what you don't pay for, and the use of free access to information is a profound one and has to be, I think, examined seriously and not in a trivial way in a kind of a quick answer to a question, right? It is a very important part of access to information for the future for all of us. Mm-hmm. But in this particular case, the most important thing to me is that the Times survives.
Right. And I've heard a number of different responses today that, some people are for it very, very much for the same reasons that you're speaking of, because it has to do with their survival and you should pay for something that is of value. But then I've heard the opposite claims where why would I pay for something that I'm already getting for free, or I can get this information now from somewhere else, or why would the New York Times decide to punish? Some people see it as a punishment for the readers that they already have.
I think it's a series of misunderstandings. What you just quoted to me was a series of misunderstandings. The reason for doing it is to ensure that the Times continues to be available to people and has a reservoir of information that we all want and need. That is the reason for the action. Mm-hmm. Punishing people is a misinterpretation. It has nothing to do with punishing anyone. It has to do, in this particular case, with whether that institution continues to exist. So misinterpreting it in terms of your own self-interest seems to me a little narrow-minded.
Mm-hmm. So today, when you wake up tomorrow morning, what are the first resources that you personally are going to tap into to get your world news or local news?
What I do in the morning customarily is I turn on Channel 1, which is a local New York station that gives you the weather report and news of any local disasters and doesn't do a very good job of anything else. And then I'll go to breakfast and I have the Times delivered and I will read the front section and the editorial, and I'll go to work, and when I get to work, I'll probably hear about everything else that I'm interested in for the day.
And has there been a period in which you've relied or checked into any digital sources? Are there any digital sources that are interesting to you?
Well, you have to realize that I'm this ancient mariner in the field of information, and so my instinct is go to newsprint before I go to anything else. And I have to say, with some degree of truth, that I've never touched a computer.
And this I think there's an interesting thing happening right now where, and I'm not sure how much of this you've heard of or are involved in. There are devices that are emerging within the last couple of years that are touchscreen devices. So we're sort of transitioning to a new period of time where our interface, the way we interact with some of these medias, are no longer going to be a mouse and a keyboard. We're actually going to be able to physically touch a paper, a digital paper, and move it. With e-readers, the Kindles come out, and people like to read books, and they don't have to, print on paper and waste ink and paper anymore. And a week from today, Apple is supposed to announce a new tablet device that, in addition to doing surfing and email and connecting with people, supposedly you're going to be able to download books and read them on just a digital device. Are you seeing this as sort of a good thing or a bad thing, or does it even sort of register?
It's neither good nor bad. I mean, it's extraordinary for sure. All changes of technology produce changes in culture, not to say changes in the mind and people's expectations. I personally have no interest in increasing my understanding of technology. I'm perfectly happy with the rudimentary way I live my life. I haven't been to the movies in 15 years. I love the computer, incidentally, and I work with one of my colleagues at the office every day on the computer, but to me the computer is a great instrument for collective work. I sit there next to someone who I'm working with, and together we do a little dance where you can do that only with the computer and work in a way that reflects two minds simultaneously. I'm very fascinated by that because I know of no other instrumentality where you can do that. And the results are fascinating because you have to moderate your point of view. You have to change and adapt to somebody else's consciousness and will. That's a great thing for anyone instead of the usual self-absorbed way of working. So the computer has made this possible for me, and I have to say, I love doing it.
Do you find it as sort of an equalizer or sort of a common ground where, in working with tangible objects and designing in physical space, there's definitely sort of visual communication barriers that you're going to run into. If you had to choose one over the other, and indefinitely work in that method, would it be working together through the computer as a portal, or would it be just through physical methods?
Well, I like to do both. Incidentally, I've just lost the picture. I assume you still have yours.
Yes.
So I'm seeing nothing but a beautiful color screen, but that
if you hit your space bar or maybe move your mouse, it should come back. I'm guessing it's a screensaver.
There it is.
There you go.
I like working both ways. I like doing work that is individual, where you're basically physically touching things. We learn through the act of motion. We learn by moving the hands. We learn through tactility. We learn by actually tearing and lifting and chewing. And so you cannot diminish the significance of the physical act in making things or the way that making things informs the brain. On the other hand, doing a work collaboratively is a different way of learning. And it means that you now are learning about another view of the work, right? Mm-hmm. You're encountering somebody who doesn't think the green you have chosen is harmonious with the orange you have chosen. And that conversation is very interesting because then you get to the idea of preference, taste, and judgment, right? All very interesting stuff. And also the fact that in your life, if you are a designer and successful at doing it, you will be working essentially collaboratively. Mm-hmm. And so you might as well get used to the fact that when you work with others, there's a kind of adaptation that has to be made and a kind of learning that occurs. It's not quite the same as the narcissistic, I made it all view of life, which is a terrible view anyhow. But the fact that the computer has given us a methodology for working with other people and modifying our view of the world through somebody else's idea or vision is fantastic.
I was reading one of your interviews and getting ready for this, and I had read that one of the things you had said, that you were sort of, somebody had asked you who you were influenced by, and your answer was, I was influenced by Picasso, and one of the things you said was, you do not have to feel bound by a single stylistic convention, and that's something that he was able to do and not stick to one style for his whole career. He could move from one style to the other and be successful in all of those. And in getting advice when sort of starting a career in design, sometimes you'll hear that you need to stick to one sort of industry. You just design for one industry and just stick to that thing and know that thing the best, and you can be the best at that, that sort of idea. And is that something that, you think that can be good advice for a young person who's getting into this, or is that going to be a stifling thing and sort of slow down their career?
Well, you have to be a little precise in your thinking about this question. What you're saying is, if you choose one area of specialization, you get to be the best on it, like it's, for instance, rendering children's hats. You can develop a career of doing that, and if you're the best at doing that, a lot of people are going to call you and ask you to render a child's hat. On the other hand, that is a professional decision that has nothing to do with the nature of your life or your life's experience. If that makes you happy, great. It's a way of offering a product for sale. But in terms of human development, in terms of stretching your mind, in terms of broadening your view, in terms of staying curious, it offers nothing. So for me, the great experience in life is to keep open-minded, to continue to learn, to reject what you have already accomplished, and to move in a way that surprises you every day. That's a personal decision, and it's about personal development versus professional objective. Some people really want to, more than anything else, achieve a place where they can guarantee their living. And there's nothing these days particularly wrong with that. Some people want to position themselves in a way that they look forward to doing something every day with the understanding that they may be able to discover something they don't already know. So those are really two separate categories, and to try to give somebody advice about which to embrace is irrelevant. It depends, what do you want out of your life?
Right, right. It needs to be more of a personal sort of answer to that sort of thing.
However you choose to phrase it, yes.
I think we've seen sort of a prolific use of the word heart in place of the symbol in the last 10 or 15 years. In that, with the advent of digital technology where we can text and we can instant message and that sort of thing, a lot of messages come across with the heart symbol. And instead of saying love, people will say heart. And we look back at the work you did for New York, the I Heart New York logo, and sort of see a beginning of that. So when I think of this subject, I think about the use of audible words versus visual words and visual symbols and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering if there are any other, and some people are sort of bothered by that trend, I heart this instead of I love that, because it doesn't really mean, love and heart, some people translate differently. Are there any other sort of audio or visual verbiage cues that you're seeing or patterns that you're liking or disliking right now?
I don't think I can answer that question. Frankly, I can't remember, nor does it interest me even slightly.
Well, that's a good position to have, because then it doesn't bother you at all. That's fantastic.
Not at all.
What does bother you that's going on in maybe design right now?
I don't know if anything bothers me. It's going on. What consistently bothers me in any human activity is stupidity, irrelevance, trivia, misdirection, misleading work that doesn't have a basis in understanding by the person who makes it. I mean, all the crap you see floating around in the culture in the world. I mean, it's distressing when you see a piece of work that is done by somebody who's stupid.
I totally agree. So in sort of starting out a career right now, there's so much, for young designers, I think there's so much noise happening right now and so much garbage that they need to filter out. What would you say are good rules to think about while you're filtering out that garbage and concentrating on what you want to do in your career?
I don't know. I mean, the first thing to do is to get a good education, and by that I mean really develop the skills and understanding that you need as a designer. And that means studying typography, learning how to draw, which is practically invisible in the design field. Building a foundation of understanding, also about language, the use of language, and understanding the relationship between symbolism and abstraction. I mean, you got to know what you're doing in an ideal sense. Incidentally, that's not necessarily all obtainable through a design school education as much as persistent study. You actually don't know anything by the time you graduate from design school. You've got to put in your time, you've got to read, you've got to think more than anything else. And the noise basically is, you know, a characteristic of our civilization. So, and I think you have to ultimately be devoted to the idea of the extraordinary and of excellence, and be willing also, and this sounds contradictory, to basically abandon everything you believe in when the evidence leads you to an understanding that what you believed in is not necessarily true. So you must hold your beliefs firmly and allow them to be changed at the same time, which sounds like a contradiction, and it is. But I think for myself, if I were to say the quality that I would most like to embrace is precisely that. To believe vigorously, enthusiastically in what I'm doing, and be prepared to say it wasn't right at the same time.
And I think this is a difficult time for designers to sort of live those ideas out right now. You know, given the fact that we're sort of living in a capitalist and economy-focused and driven world, and on top of that, things aren't going well, and a lot of people are out of work. I feel a lot of people right now are sort of compromising their beliefs and working for companies that they don't necessarily agree with, and are being sort of put in a bad position.
Well, I think that's true. It's one of the difficulties of life itself, and it has always been a difficulty. The difference between I and thou, the idea that if your first loyalty to your family is to put bread on the table, the fact that you have to look to your own survival, always is in conflict with other issues in the culture, particularly when people want you to do things that you don't believe in. But again, this is what life is about, and there are no easy solutions. These are truly difficult problems that everybody has to face in their life when they know that they are being compromised in what they do, but they see no alternative. Certainly, the pursuit of the alternative is a desirable characteristic. And I mean, what you want to feel is that you have not given up, and you're not just out of laziness, not pursuing what it is you really want to do or how you really want to live. You know, it was so interesting to hear the torture discussions that were going on a few months ago, where the issue about torture was, you don't torture until it's necessary. Well, I scarcely think that that was a moral position or an ethical position, and it simplified it to, I think, a very unfortunate degree. But that same issue of doing things you don't really want to do is present in everybody's life, and it has always been present in everybody's life.
Is there a time in which that you felt sort of that you had compromised on something and done work for a company that you didn't necessarily agree with? And how did that go, and how did you deal with it moving forward?
Well, from time to time that I've done that. And from time to time, I did it because I wasn't fully conscious of what the nature of the company was. I could say that I've tried by and large throughout my life not to lie to the public, not to put myself in a position where I was transmitting information that I thought was harmful. So by and large, I'm sure that I have transgressed and I've done something partially through being stupid, partially through being unaware or inattentive. But by and large, my principle has been to do no harm, and is a principle that I encourage my students to take. That one of the things, if you want to talk about ethics in design, which is a complex subject, is first, as doctors are supposed to do no harm. And I think that is a good rule. And then the next question is, how do you know if you're doing harm? And that's a little more complex.
And on the sort of opposite end of that scale, what in your work brings you the most joy? What type of client or project or activity? It could be as simple as, getting your desk set up. What about your work brings you the most joy?
Thinking about it, connecting things that I didn't know were connected. I love the idea part of every job, where you are sort of rummaging around and you don't know where the idea is, and suddenly it presents itself. I love the fact that finally in your mind you realize that everything is connected, and that all you have to do is allow for the connections to become apparent. And I also love the act of physically making something. I love coloring. I love the action of a pen on ink. I love creating form through cross-hatching. I love the physical act of drawing and painting. And it's something that I would hate to give up. And I mean, very often, as you know, there are many designers who don't draw, don't paint, and who are very good designers indeed. But my career started from the point of view of somebody who drew and illustrated and made pictures in some degree. And while I don't do that as much as I used to, for any number of reasons, the fact that drawing is in my blood informs what I do. It informs my sense of scale, of proportion, of size, and all the other things in a way that I don't think is immediately obvious, but it's there.
You just kind of mentioned that, some designers can be good designers without sort of understanding or being good at the physical act of drawing. Could you say that there's one skill, be it a reasoning skill or something of that nature, that is absolutely necessary to be a good designer, that you cannot be a successful designer without?
Well, it is, and this ability to make connections, to understand the relationship between things that are not necessarily easily connected. And that ability to bring those ideas together, whether it's physical or visual or ideological, is the best thing that designers need, the best thing they can have, because they see connections that they can physically bring together on a surface that changes the nature of the perception of an audience. And so that is primary as far as what a designer's essential gift is.
I see two cool or interesting levels of discovery in that there's the understanding of the connection as the designer, and there's also the understanding of the connection as a reader. And I think it's interesting to sort of play off of both of those worlds, where you as a designer, you need to be able to create those connections to be readable in a very quick manner, because you don't want the idea to blow by your audience or be too difficult or being over clever as a designer. I think is a big issue, and something that we all fight doing all the time. Is there a moment that you can think of that where you saw a piece of design that it just struck you fast enough to sort of burn an image in your mind?
Not sure I understand your question, but let me try to answer it even if I don't understand it. There always is an interval between seeing and understanding on the part of a viewer. I mean, when you're talking to somebody, your audience, you realize that one way to engage them is to create a little puzzle for them. That is to create something that is at first not completely understandable. That provokes interest in theory, and it engages the reader until they solve the puzzle. Now, the distance between seeing something and understanding it, or to say, to be more specific, the interval of time is critical. If it's a quarter of a second, you're cool. If it's a half a second, well, maybe. If it's a second, maybe you made it too difficult. In any case, that interval has to be understood by the maker, right? He understands how long you can engage the reader before the reader fully understands what you're doing. And cleverness, actually, as soon as you're more conscious of the cleverness than you are of the intent, you're in bad shape. So you should be immediately suspicious of anything that seems overly clever.
So what I feared would happen has happened. It's already 8:27, and our sort of 30-minute time is rushed up upon us here. So what I'm going to do here is make just a couple short announcements. We do this every week. DesignChat is a weekly show and podcast. You can come here and see us at mashable.com/chat, or download us as a podcast on iTunes. So definitely be sure to check those out. And the website, designchat.info. Look for those links in the chat room. Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to scroll down, and I have so many questions to pick from here. It's completely overwhelming. And to be absolutely accurate of the 3 best questions in this group, I think will be impossible. But I think we've got a couple of good ones here for you, Milton. So I'm just going ahead and kick it off. So from Nick Witchman asks, have you ever had a time when you wanted to just leave the design field? And if so, why? What for?
No, I've never had that experience. I've wanted to get away from the day-to-day practice to sort of refresh my mind, but I never had the idea of leaving the field.
Gary Rozank asks, from Cooper to Pushpin to present, what do you want to be remembered for in 100 years from now?
Doing good work.
A simple but elegant and beautiful answer. M2 asks, with so many aspects of design training draining the creative spirit, print, web, social media, digital, how can designers stay fresh, inspired, and creative and at their creative best?
Like one of those questions that you need a psychiatrist's answer. I mean, you just do your work and you try to make it as good as possible, and you keep reading and you stay alive. And to refer back to an earlier moment, you have to be willing to give up what you already believe in.
These chats can never last long enough. At the end of even an hour-long session, I usually end up saying, man, I could just getting warmed up. I could do another hour. But, you know, this has been a wonderful experience. I want to extend my gratitude towards you for participating in this tonight.
Sure.
Thank you to everybody who has shown up and wanted to participate and ask questions. This is a very exciting thing, and if you got anything out of this tonight, definitely come back and join us for another week. Milton, definitely a pleasure, and thank you so much for coming out tonight. Everybody, applause for Milton.
Good luck, guys.
Thank you.
Keep it going.
Will do, definitely. I'm going to stay on for just a little bit and make some more announcements. So thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Just hang out for a couple more seconds, guys. So they'll get it figured out. I'm just going to keep on going and make announcements here. So if you haven't participated in tonight, I hope you guys had a good time. Definitely send us your feedback on Twitter. I'm at Hoopajube and at DesignChat. Check us out on our website, designchat.info. And also, please subscribe to our iTunes link. We're putting those up in the chat room as we speak. We've got a Facebook page. Try to link us up on that. Search for DesignChat on Facebook, and we post images from there. We'll post some extra content from the show. And you know what I've got actually is I've recorded a whole bunch of intro sort of startup warm-up talk that, you know, we start a technical check-in at 7:30. So what that means is if my person gets on at 7:30, I've got half an hour of conversation that a lot of people don't get to see. So start looking for some of those releases on Facebook. Those are going to be the only places that you can get them. So thanks again to everybody coming out. Much appreciated. We're going to keep this going. We've got a lot of interesting people coming on next week. We've got Douglas Gayton, author of the book Slow Life in a Tuscan Town. He's a designer and author and photographer. Amazing person. He's going to be very cool discussion. Stephen Heller is going to be joining us soon, the prolific design writer. And check out our about page on designchat.info. Guests. We've got the whole list of upcoming guests. A lot of cool people, a lot of cool things going on. Some other interesting things that are happening in April. Emily Peloton of Project H Design is going to be coming to town in Chicago. She's bringing her Design Revolution Road Tour. The Design Revolution is a book that she wrote, and she's bringing around, the book involves a lot of sort of industrial design physical objects. She has got an Airstream, like 1950s, straight up 1950s Airstream trailer that she's touring around the country. Instead of doing a normal book tour like everybody does, she's packing that full of the objects from her book, and she's going around to design schools and that sort of thing. I have gotten her to agree to bring that trailer to Samada Mason. What we're going to do is we're going to do a live event. So it's going to be like a regular design chat like we usually do, but we're going to invite all you guys out here to sort of experience that and actually come out and talk to Emily Peloton, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Stephen Heller is going to be talking to us in February, I believe, and we're going to try to make that a live tweet-up event. If you're in around Chicago, definitely come check that out. And so just thank you to everybody for coming out. This has been a good time, and I hope to see you guys soon. So this is Design Chat. Talk to you later.